Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, Tuesday we had my favorite day of every fall camp, every spring camp, every season when we get to talk to a certain positional group. It was Offensive Lineman Day. Offensive Lineman Day is always my favorite. I don't know what it is about offensive linemen, but they are always the most interesting interviews.
Yeah, and it's a wide array of people and numbers and types, and we talked to 10 of them today. It was essentially the first offensive line and the second offensive line, because if you looked at the two deep at practice today, which we got to look at, it was those same 10. So today we got to watch about 30 minutes of practice, the first 4 periods, and then afterwards come in and talk to Greg Stadrama and the offensive line. So I figure we should pretty much go over what we saw in practice first off.
Sure.
Of which I'll just start. The first thing I saw when I came in was they were doing kickoff returns. And so I missed like the first group, and they're like, okay, bring in the number 2s. And it was Emeka Egbuka returning with the 2s. And then they're like, okay, let's do the 3s, and it was Evan Pryor. And then they're like, okay, let's go 1s, and it was Travion Henderson.
Yeah, that's intriguing, because Travion Henderson is someone who you talk to anybody, I mean literally anybody, and they can't stop telling you how exciting a prospect Travion Henderson is. And we talk to anyone, you hear from guys here, when Nevada talks to people, when Kirk talks to people, like everyone's hearing the same thing. When everyone's hearing the same thing about a guy, okay, this means something. He's someone who I think we've been talking since the spring about, like, yeah, he probably enters the fall 4th or so on the depth chart, but look for him to start climbing that ladder. I think he might be climbing that ladder already. But he is so explosive, he's so fast, he's so shifty, he's just got such quick feet that he's someone that they have to get the ball in his hands. And, if the running back room is going to be stacked enough that, like it is, where you're not going to be able to necessarily get him 25 carries a game, well, put him back on kickoffs, and maybe that's a way to get a touch or 2 for him as well.
Now, I will say, Demario McCall was back there as well, just watching. So maybe they were trading out, here and there, but it was just, I don't know if it's anything. I don't think it's nothing. It's something to keep an eye out. Like you said, get him the ball however many different ways you can, even top, if it has to be a fair catch.
I mean, at least there's a possibility, and that's a lot of true freshmen to have back there, because you're being trusted to not turn the ball over and not cost your team a full possession. So, it'll be interesting to see where those guys, where those guys are repping a couple weeks from now. I think, they're still in the try some stuff out phase of camp right now. So maybe that's not final, but it's certainly intriguing.
Do you think it has anything to do with me back in the spring challenging Parker Fleming, telling him, what are you going to do to get a kickoff return touchdown at Ohio State? I haven't had one since when? 2009? 2010.
The 2010 season, Jordan Hall ran one back against Michigan in a game that did not happen. And so now before that, Ohio State hasn't had a non-vacated kick return since sometime before that. So, but yes, it has been more than a decade since Ohio State has had even a kickoff return that you just remember in your brain, even if it isn't in the record books. So, yeah, it does. The game obviously shifting away from kick returns. So, that is it possible that's the last one in Ohio State history? Like, it's not as crazy to say that is possible, as it might have been, a couple of years ago. But if you do have someone back there that explosive, like, okay, that's intriguing to me. That I'm gonna pick my head up and watch kickoffs instead of sitting typing on my computer.
What happens first, returning an onside kick for a touchdown or returning a regular kick for a touchdown? What happens next?
I can only remember like 1 or 2 onside kicks being returned for touchdowns. I remember like a UCLA Northwestern Sun Bowl where that happened. I don't know that I can remember another one. So yeah, I'm gonna say, just based on mathematical probability, I'm going to say a regular kick return for a touchdown.
Okay, all right. I mean, kickoffs we know are going to be outlawed. So I'm going to play the long game. I'm going to go onside kick return for a touchdown.
Come find me in 2087 and we'll settle this bet.
Watch the quarterbacks today. It's still C.J. Stroud, Jack Miller, Kyle McCord in terms of the order they are repping. Watched them throw some long balls. Watched them throw some one-on-ones. I thought C.J. Stroud had the better day of all three. Just in fact, they were doing some long ball drills, okay, and you see C.J. Stroud starts out, throws a couple really nice ones, and then he's done. And then it's like Jack Miller has to go in, and he had some bad throws, so they kept, like, it was almost like you had to leave with a good throw. And so it took him a couple, and it took Kyle McCord. And then it was Jagger LaRoe and J.P. Andre getting their chance to do it as well. And it was interesting. They were getting more reps at the deep throw when I was watching than C.J. Stroud. So I don't know what that means.
I do.
Oh,
I do.
yeah.
I think we may have a sense who's running first for the quarterback position, and with the decision likely coming sometime after Saturday, I think I would know who I would make the heavy betting favorite. I think that's maybe what my takeaway from that would be.
Jagger LaRoe.
Facts only.
He did come in with the Troy Aikman jersey.
And did you see he had the Troy Aikman jersey tucked into the front of his pants so you can see his
belt
belt buckle? Yes, because
that's a starter move.
Texas gonna Texas, baby.
That is true. One day after Ryan Day was like, don't read into any of the way guys are repping or lining up. Today it was Master Teague lining up first with the running backs, then Mayan Williams, then Marcus Crowley, then Travion Henderson, then Evan Pryor. So Tom, don't read into anything like that, even though the day before when he's asked, constantly about Mayan Williams this, Mayan Williams that, running first, going first, and then the next day there's somebody different. Should we not?
I feel like there's a lot of confirmation bias that goes into this stuff, because you see the stuff that you're expecting to see and it's like, aha, this means something, and you see something else that you're not expecting to see. It's like, well, they got to make it look fair. They got to keep it. They got to keep everyone happy. They got to keep, So, realistically, you've got minimally three guys who are going to be getting carries. It's not like they're just appeasing someone right now, and oh, look at you, you're running first. Look at you, what a big boy. The guys who are running on the front of the line right now are guys who are going to have 8-10 carries against Minnesota in a couple weeks. This is not just like pure appeasement. I think there's three guys who they're probably, I think between Master Teague, Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson, those are your top three running backs going into that Minnesota game. We'll see what order they come out in and who gets the most carries, and then who does the most with those carries, who maybe fits best with the style of offense they're going to run, inside zone. And
who's the guy in the fourth quarter?
Who's the guy in the who's the guy in the fourth quarter if they're up by 30, and who's the guy in the fourth quarter if they're up by 7? Those are two separate conversations. So, I'm not ready to, I'm much more confident in the quarterback running order right now than I am in the running back running order. But I think the top three in the running backs, I'm pretty sure those are going to be the top three for the Minnesota game.
I feel pretty good about the receiver order as well. Watching the one-on-ones today, Marvin Harrison had just a little simple slant where it was like shoe top catch. And this is a guy who's 6'3", he's a big guy, went down, grabbed it, nothing but hands. Just everything he does looks better than it should. He looks better than he should. I don't know if he's ever looked like a freshman since he arrived. Physically, no, he did not look like a freshman. On the field, has never once looked like a freshman. Has only looked, I think I said in the past, like a sophomore and a half. And today he was looking, kind of like a junior, like a Marvin Harrison Jr.
He is someone who, you hear son of an NFL player. And it's like, okay, so this is someone who probably grew up eating right, training correctly, putting in the work, knowing what goes into, and you've got the genetics too. All of these things are important when you hear son of an NFL player. I always feel like there's a little bit of an added bonus when son of an NFL player plays the same position as the NFL player. So Teron Vincent is the son of Troy Vincent. Teron Vincent's a defensive tackle. Troy Vincent was a defensive back. So it's not, it's not exactly the same. Troy Vincent, I'm sure, can give you at least a decent run through defensive line technique and all that kind of stuff, but he didn't play it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a wide receiver. Marvin Harrison Sr. is an NFL Hall of Fame wide receiver. It seems like you could probably get coached up. I mean, that's like having Brian Hartline in your house all the time from the time you were 5 years old to coach you up, work on training you, refining your technique. I mean, and you have the genes, it's all there. So it's never super surprising to me when you have a guy who is son of an NFL player who plays that same position, who comes in, it's like, wow, this guy looks so much more prepared than the typical player. I wonder why that could possibly be.
I saw C.J. Stroud drop a long one into Jackson Smith and Jigba, just like perfectly down the sideline in coverage, decent coverage by I don't even remember who it was, but it was just good to see. It was a perfect throw that you expect from the number one quarterback, and to a slot receiver who's going to be running open quite a bit this year. And I don't know, Tom, we've seen the slot receivers kind of running open quite a bit in camp and in spring as well. Maybe that's a concern, maybe that's not. We should maybe skip the offensive line because we'll finish with that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to go to defensive
Sure.
line, anything you saw today, anything there?
They were working on tackling. This was the first day in full pads, so they started working on tackling. Now, I'm thinking back to like watching practice towards the end of the John Cooper era and how they worked on tackling back then versus how they're working on tackling now. And they had like big mats, the kind of mats that like you're jumping out of you're jumping off of. When someone's like doing a Hell in a Cell wrestling thing and you throw
Yes.
the guy off the top of the thing and he lands on the big mat, like big mats like that, really cushion your fall. And you've got a guy standing there kind of facing you, and then the guy who's trying to do the drill, wraps him up around his thighs, picks him up and drops him on the mat. I mean, they're just working on real form tackling right there. You saw a little bit of that. Saw a little bit, they doing some of the other stuff that we typically see them do, but that was the first time we've gotten to see them really do tackling. It's just interesting to me how they talk about, well, you have to be in full pads and you want to work on tackling, you got to be in full pads to do some of the stuff, and it's like, well, you're still not. This is not, you're not exactly seeing vicious hits out there right now, which is, that's good. You want to keep guys healthy. There's no sense in dinging guys up right now, to just work on stuff. And this is a very, very basic technique drill, but that was one of the things I saw the defensive line working on today.
Talked to Enoch Vamahi afterwards about Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, and he said you can see, because he worked against Jack Sawyer in the spring, has seen him grow, and he's like, well, you guys saw what he could do in the spring, but now he's added the rush defense end of it as well, where he's not just a pass rusher. So you've seen him grow. He's gotten bigger, gotten stronger, he's spent good time in the weight room, and has really come on. JT said Enoch is still learning his moves, trying to figure out what he does well, but they both are big guys who can run. And I wrote about JT Tuimoloau earlier today, and so you can check that out on BuckeyeScoop.com, just about how when we talked to Ryan Day yesterday about him, and he mentioned at some points like he's unblockable at times when everything is clicking and he knows what he's doing. And those two guys saw Tyler Friday, who's injured, helping out as basically an assistant coach. He's watching the drills. He pulled Darian Henry Young aside one point after drill and was like showing him how to actually do it. And so you see like Darian Henry Young like mimicking it, and yes, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. So like it's always interesting to watch the guys who can't practice still very, very much involved, and that's what Tyler Friday was today.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting to me is the guys who were the young guys, who were the quiet guys who were kind of back of the line, all of a sudden they're taking a leadership role. We've talked a bunch about Zach Harrison, and he was at Big Ten Media Days, and Ryan Day talked a bunch about him. Today, at the beginning of practice, Ryan Day's up addressing the team, and then he calls someone up to talk to the team. And, we're on the far end of the field. We're 100-something yards away. We can't hear what he's saying. But there's one guy standing up in front of the team talking for, 45 seconds, a minute and a half, something like that. Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And it was just like, because he has always struck me as kind of a soft-spoken guy, not the vocal type. He's not ever been the guy who's, he started one game, but that was because he's a New Jersey native and they were playing a garbage Rutgers team a couple of years ago. So it was like he and Tyler Friday got the, honorary starts as New Jersey natives at Rutgers. But he's never been that first pair defensive end. He's never been, he's very soft-spoken. He's not, real, you don't hear guys talking about him. Like he was not someone that I thought like might be a captain this year. He just, he's doing fine. His career's going great. Everything's going wonderfully. He's just not someone who you think of that way. And then he got up in front of the team and talked. I thought that was very interesting. It was just like, there's a bunch of people I wouldn't have raised an eyebrow at. That was kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you just put it in the back of your mind for some other occasion. But yeah, that's interesting. And he's a guy who is a fourth-year junior, and so they need as much leadership with that group as they can get. Linebackers, I saw Cody Simon off walking with Jalen Johnson, signifying some type of minor injury. So I don't know if he got back in there. I don't know if you saw him out there practicing.
I did not see that, yeah.
So I don't think it's anything major. But that was about the only thing I saw with the linebackers, because the linebackers are always like 120 yards away from us. And it's like for me, I almost don't even bother watching them, because there's other stuff. Like, we have a limited window.
Yeah.
And we've got maybe like 20 to 30 minutes of watching stuff. And I'm trying to get quarterbacks. And I'm trying to, okay, let's see what the offensive line is. And running back repping. It's like the linebackers get totally almost ignored by me just because they're so far away. And I mean, it's hard to see from that far.
Yeah, I mean, generally the quarterbacks and the linebackers are on the furthest point of the field. And if we're going to spend time looking at one of them, you know, general interest, fan interest levels, and which pictures are people going to want to look at kind of levels is like, well, I'm going to focus, you know, when I'm going to do that, I'm going to be looking at the quarterbacks. And, you know, when there might be a drill coming towards us, I'm going to be shooting the quarterbacks, not necessarily the linebackers. So, yeah, I'm kind of the same way. And, you know, they're far enough down there, like sometimes it's, you know, 100 yards down and also across the field. So it's 130 yards or so of actual distance. And you can't necessarily make out the numbers on the jerseys, and they're doing stuff running away from you. So, yeah,
it's not the best picture, not the best footage.
Yeah, I did not have any big takeaways from the linebackers. They did, and the defensive backs as well did do the same drills, you know, with the tackling onto the mat thing. So you got a little bit of linebackers there, but it was, you know, I mean, there wasn't any. I had no huge takeaways like, oh wow, these four guys aren't there anymore, or anything.
The corners, the only takeaway I had, and I don't even like talking about it, is Jalen Johnson had a rough day tackling today, and it was only like maybe 3 times that I saw him. Each of those times he was getting juked out a little bit. It's not a big deal to me. This is what, practice 6?
Right. Practice 6 for a guy who wasn't here in the spring. So
that's just one. I have to bring something notable. So that's what I saw. I don't know that I saw anything else from the corners. Seven Banks was not doing anything, if I saw that correctly.
I don't remember seeing him run. They were running a drill where the wide receivers, they started facing opposite directions. And the wide receivers went one direction and ran around a cone, and the defensive backs went the other direction and ran around a cone. And then they were coming towards each other, and the wide receiver had to try and juke the defensive back. Not any huge takeaways from there. Chris Booker, walk-on wide receiver, looked, I mean, he was making guys miss, and not making just like, oh, true freshman walk-on. Like, no, like he was making guys miss. He's someone they have no shortage of talent as wide receiver. Just, you know, fourth quarter of the Akron game, if number 86 shows up on the field and does something, just go, yes, that must be Chris Booker. I remember them talking about him a month ago.
Exactly.
But yeah, there was it was interesting to watch Demario McCall in that drill and trying to tackle guys and you know, got some of them, didn't get some of them. You know, you saw a lot of, in some of the passing drills, and this is a quarterback with no rush in his face and you know, 3.5 or 4 seconds to throws. This is basically 7-on-7. A bunch of drag routes over the middle where guys were, you know, you're looking at walk-ons getting open against scholarship guys. It's like, that's probably, you know, it's not a problem yet, but it's like, put that, you know, file that away as like, the concerns about the defensive backfield are not necessarily completely solved yet. I did find, yet again, I have a great picture of, I don't think it's up yet. I put up half the gallery on Tuesday morning. I'll finish it after we're done this afternoon, but another great picture of Garrett Wilson catching a ball, turning upfield, juking out a defender, and he starts taking out off upfield, and Kerry Combs is like, you can just tell he's, you know, it looks like Yosemite Sam, concern it, and very visibly upset looking at what has just happened with the defensive backs.
I don't recall who that was, but yes, I do remember that play. Saw, you know, Josh Proctor give up a catch to Emeka Egbuka on one of those over the middle things where those, like, I don't know how often Josh Proctor is going to be matched up against a slot receiver, but you know, just that's one of those kind of drills that's a little bit unfair to the defender, which is probably why defensive coaches like it and also hate it at the same time. But that was, you know, not much to take away from the DBs. I did shoot quite a bit of video of one-on-ones and the stuff we're talking about, so you can find that at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop, or you can find the videos in the thread I started Tuesday morning of the practice updates on our Ask the Insiders message board. Anything else before we get to the offensive line?
Saw some field goal kicking, and the way they did the field goal kicking, we couldn't actually necessarily see who was kicking the field goals. it was, I mean, there was nothing got blocked.
That's good.
And it felt like everything was okay about to 30, 35 yards. And once they got into 40, I think I saw one or two that missed, which is not, it's not great. Again, I couldn't tell you whether it was Jake Siebert, Noah Ruggles, Dom DiMaccio. Like, it was one of them, presumably. It was one of them, presumably. They had all, a bunch of the players standing between us and the kicker. So it was like, well, it's someone. I can say definitively it was someone kicking a football. So, I mean, we'll see what the kicking, the race for the starting kicker position looks like. I don't know when we get to talk to Parker Fleming, but that'll be interesting to see. Because, you brought in a guy as a grad transfer to potentially push Jake Siebert. We'll see if that has inspired him or, maybe brought in his, maybe he got Wally pipped. We'll see where that stands a little further into camp probably.
Are you ready for the offensive line?
I am ready for the offensive line.
First, let's start off. Ryan Jacoby hit the transfer portal this week. Kind of a surprise that it was this late, but when you look at the amount of depth and the fact that in his first 2 years he never saw the field, and the writing was on the wall there. So as mentioned before the show, or at the start of the show, not before, talked to Greg Stadrawa, talked to the top 5 offensive linemen, which, Tom, I guess we should start there.
Yes.
The top 5 offensive linemen at Ohio State right now and the positions that they play. We discussed this in more depth on Wednesday's morning scoop.
We'll have a long conversation about all of this and where this fits and why this makes sense possibly on Wednesday's morning scoop. But, I mean, it sounds like the crazy stuff that Nevada was posting on our Ask the Insiders board last week that I kind of looked at and went, really? That's not, are you sure? Turns out he was right. Yes, Nicholas Petit-Frere kicking from right guard to left guard. Thayer Munford sliding inside from left tackle. I'm sorry, right tackle to left tackle. Thayer Munford sliding inside from left tackle to left guard. Harry Miller at center. Paris Johnson at right guard. And DeJuan Jones at right tackle. It's interesting to me. I mean, they always have the 5 best guys and get the 5 best guys in the field, however you have to do it. Sometimes that feels a little bit like lip service. This is like, all right, they are getting the 5 best guys in the field. 4 of them happen to be tackles, so they're just gonna get those 5 guys in the field and arrange them and get them in the best spot to succeed.
I understand this being, because you look at it and like, yeah, okay, I could see that being the best 5. But then they're actually doing it. They're like, no, we're actually going to put the best 5. It doesn't matter what positions they used to be at. And then to see them out there and to have it confirmed like by your own eyes, it's like, holy cow, this is actually happening. And it's not just happening a little bit. It's happening quite a bit, possibly all the time and for several days on end, and will continue happening up until Saturday for the scrimmage where things will get finalized. And by all accounts from everybody we've talked to, things are going so well. At this point, it would be a surprise if this is not the lineup at Minnesota, which even 2 days ago, a day ago, it would be crazy to me. Not that I didn't believe it, it just felt like more trying stuff to try stuff. But then when you try stuff to try stuff, sometimes it works.
Yeah, and this is not, sometimes you'll see stuff in spring ball, especially, you go back to the first day of spring camp and we're in here and it's like, wow, this guy's always been a corner. Now he's playing safety. This is crazy. And then the next day he's back at corner. You see stuff the first day of spring ball, the first week of spring ball, and it's like, they're throwing all sorts of crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. This was practice 6 of fall camp. The first game against Minnesota is just over. It's 3 weeks and 2 days away. I mean, it's here. They have talked about the fact that they want to have a decision on quarterback. They want to have a decision on offensive line, more or less made after the scrimmage on Saturday. Like, you're not wasting a week of reps in fall camp on like a whim. This is something they are seriously considering. And, no one wanted to say, like Nick Petit-Frere was asked, like, so what, how likely do you think it's going to be that you're going to play right tackle versus left tackle? It's like, you didn't want to get into that. Like, but the fact that this has now happened, this has been, this got talked about on the Ask the Insiders board a week ago, so obviously this has been going on for a week. It's still happening. you're coming up on your sort of self-imposed deadline for when you want to have a decision. The longer this happens, and it's been going a while now, the longer this happens, the more likely it is that this is how things are really going to look when they play Minnesota.
So we talked to those 5. And then the second 5, the second unit was Enoch Vamahi at left tackle, Matt Jones at left guard, Luke Whippler at center, freshman Donovan Jackson at right guard, and then at right tackle is Josh Fryer, the redshirt freshman. So just the number of guys that can play different spots. A couple days ago, last week, Josh Fryer was contending for the left guard spot. Now he's back at right tackle, which is where he also played last year. Also, I think may have done some left tackle. I asked Enoch Vamahi, who came here, I was like, did you ever think you'd be a left tackle at Ohio State? He's like, no, I came here to be a guard. Like, well, do you see yourself as a guard or a tackle? He's like, I see myself as a Swiss Army knife. And there are, I don't know, about 8 Swiss Army knives on this offensive line, because you've got Thayer Munford, who can clearly play any of 4 spots. Enoch Vamahi believes he can as well. Paris Johnson can play any of those 4 spots. And if you ask any of these guys, hey, we need you at center, they're going to go do it.
And it's interesting because there's always this balance here where you want to be the guy who can do a bunch of different stuff. Because then if you can be the backup or, the second best option at 3 or 4 different spots on the line, well, guess what? You've got a lot more possibility to get on the field. You're also kind of cross-training yourself for your future in the NFL. At the same time, reps are precious. If you're going to be the future left tackle, do you want to be taking reps at all, all these other spots? Like, there's a balancing act there. But this does fit very much with their philosophy of you want guys to be able to do a bunch of different stuff. They want their wide receivers to be able to play outside and play inside. They want guys to be able to play at multiple different offensive line positions, because if you've got, if you have a Thayer Munford who comes back for his, an unexpected 5th year, if the only thing you can do is play left tackle and Thayer Munford's playing left tackle, then and he's not going to move, then you've got another year where there's nothing else you can do. You're out of luck. Now Thayer Munford sounds like he's moving inside, so that might not be a great example, but that's okay. But it fits very much with all the other stuff in college football right now, which is like you're just sort of preparing yourself for just in case. Just in case you have the crazy Michigan State game from last year where you've got 3 starting offensive linemen out on Tuesday, they're out, and now it's okay, now you've got to completely throw a whole new line out there in with just a couple days notice. And it wasn't perfect, and Harry Miller talked a lot about that game. That was interesting to talk to Harry Miller about that game, but it wasn't perfect. But they put up 50 points on the road against a decent Big Ten team. So it was it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. So
do you need it to be perfect?
Yeah. At that point, you don't need perfection. You need to win. And the offensive line that day was not perfect, but did more than enough to win. That whole offensive line that day graded out as champions. That tells you an awful lot about why that's so important for them to have guys who can play in a bunch of different spots. I mean, you go back to Brandon Bowen a couple of years ago. Brandon Bowen was it felt like you went into camp and it's Brandon Bowen's probably the second best option at least 1 tackle spot and both guard spots. So when someone gets hurt, you've got another guy who's ready to go in and not have a big step back and play.
And let's at least touch on why these changes have come about. And it's because DeJuan Jones has basically demanded it through his play. And also it was Thayer Munford's idea that, hey, he went to Greg Studrawa and said, Coach, DeJuan is playing so well, we need to get him on the field. I will move inside in order to make that happen, which tells you all you need to know about Thayer Munford, who is playing for the NFL draft. I mean, he's not playing for the NFL draft, but that is also on his horizon. And that is a very important thing for all of these guys. And for him to be, at the 3-year starter at left tackle, very, very good. Wants to show everybody 1 more year at left tackle that his back is fine. He's excellent. He can play the position in the NFL. Instead, he's willing to move inside because it's best for the team, and it gets the best 5 out there. And it's impressive to see.
Yeah, it was interesting to talk to him. He talked about his conversation with DeJuan Jones about coming back, because he should have been done after last season. He got that COVID year, so he had a 5th year. He had a conversation with DeJuan Jones where he said, look, hey, buddy, you know how you thought there was going to be an open tackle job? Well, now there's not. I'm coming back. And it was you could tell, I'm sure that was kind of a bummer for Dewan because you have been here for a couple of years and now you want to compete for a starting job. Well, now there's not a starting job open. But, I mean, you said Dewan told him.
Yeah, it sounded like the conversation Thayer told Dewan, like, look, if you show yourself that you can be trusted and you play well in camp, in fall camp, I am willing to move inside if you show that you can be one of those 5. And he took that to heart and has played really, really well. They all have, and now they've got time to gel, which is important. Last year, they played well despite having different offensive lines almost every week, and they were able to gel on a weekly basis. This group, if you get them to gel and you've got plenty of time. Tom, my only concern, and maybe this is way off base.
Almost undoubtedly, but go on.
Remember 2018 when they had, I believe, 4 tackles on the offensive line?
Yes.
It did not go well with the running game. Now we can say that's because Dwayne Haskins wasn't a running threat. I also think that offensive line was not the best in terms of run blocking, but it was a very tall offensive line with Michael Jordan and Malcolm Pridgeon.
Demetrius Knox.
And so it's like, are there any concerns running the ball with this group?
You know, that's an interesting question because it's the tackle body and the tackle build and the tackle mentality and physicality is different from a guard. Guard is much more physical. It's much more just brute strength. Tackle's a little bit more quickness. So, yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think your tackles who are playing inside this year are significantly better than your tackles who are playing inside 2018. You know, I don't know that Malcolm Pridgeon and Demetrius Knox would question that Thayer Munford and Paris Johnson are probably better offensive linemen than those two were. What's interesting to me is you being the negative one. I was thinking, do you remember back in 1994 when Ohio State would show that tackle over formation? I remember them doing it in the Michigan game in 1994 where you had Orlando Pace and you had Corey Stringer, and sometimes they put the two of them on the same line and they would just mash people into dust. You probably don't have a Orlando Pace or a Corey Stringer level tackle on this team. Probably. I mean, we'll see. That's, you know, these are the guys who you don't comp anyone to because it's ridiculous and irresponsible. So you probably don't have that. But it open up some intriguing possibilities. And Stud talked about the fact that, like, yeah, these guys aren't necessarily, you know, like Wyatt Davis, like built like a refrigerator kind of guys, but they're quicker. So you have the potential to get into the guys in front of you. You're going against big defensive tackles. Paris Johnson's not a little guy. Paris Johnson's not 270 pounds. Paris Johnson can play inside. Thayer Munford can play inside. If they're quicker and they can get into guys' legs quicker, you get up under guys quicker. You know, maybe that's something. This is one of these things you don't really see that often. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out because, you know, if you've got tackles, you know, if you get tackles playing guard, your pulling guards are a lot quicker. They can get out a lot quicker. They can hit, you know, get downfield a lot quicker than a typical pulling guard. I'm going to be super interested to see if they go with this, all the different possible things that this could mean for them.
The Ohio State pass protection has sometimes been a little susceptible.
Easy for you to say.
Up the middle. Now you got Paris Johnson and Thayer Munford as two of your guards. That would seem to help that out. Tom, is it? Do you think would you be surprised if Ohio State ends up with the best pair of guards in the nation this year?
I would not be surprised if Ohio State won the Joe Moore Award this year for the best offensive line. I will say that because I think, I mean, you go across that line and it's Nick Petit-Frere is a 5-star, Thayer Munford is a 4-star, but now a 5th-year starter. I mean, that's pretty rare. Harry Miller, 5-star. Paris Johnson, 5-star. DeJuan Jones, size of a planet. Like, I mean, he's got the unique blend of biggest human being on the field by a mile and also incredibly quick feet, like incredibly athletic. Like, he's not just like the big blob of goo out there. He can move. And, you know, Stidrara said that you can't go through him, but you also can't go around him. I mean, that's a challenge. That is a real challenge because then it's like, okay, well, now what? And it is. I don't know for sure that this is going to be like the best Ohio State offensive line ever or anything like that, but it's like this might be the most intriguing Ohio State line ever because it's just like this is so different and there's so much talent there, and there's so much talent with the second tier of guys too, the second line there, that it's like even if someone goes down, it's like, well, now this is even more intriguing because now it's like, oh, now Donovan Jackson, who's another 5-star, could be in there, or Josh Fryer, who's been super impressive all along. Enoch Famahi, who you keep getting great reports on, like Matt Jones, another number 1 center on this when he was recruited last year. Luke Whippler, top 50 guy. I mean, like this is incredible depth at a spot where they didn't have depth for a long time. Like you don't have to go back very far. When they were recruiting Enoch Famahi, depth was like critical issue for the offensive line. Now it's like, oh yeah, this is maybe the deep, the best 2 deep I've ever seen for Ohio State offensive line.
Yeah, the days of needing to bring a defensive lineman over to start at right tackle are way gone. And go back to like Jim Bowman and Jim Tressel's recruiting, where they would, they've got like 8 guys and 3 of them can do separate things, and they don't need any more because they've got guys who can do different things. And Ohio State now is like, well, we have many more guys, and we also have more guys who can do more things. We like options, and they've got a ton of options, and you guys will see it on the field here in the coming weeks. Anything else from today?
I think that covers it, but I am so intrigued to hear what comes out of that scrimmage on Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, I am so intrigued to hear. It's like, there is an Ohio State quarterback battle between 3 quarterbacks who are top 100 guys, 2 of whom were 5-stars, and it's like, yeah. I mean, like, whatever. But, like, let's talk about the running backs. Let's talk about the offensive line. Like, I mean, this is really intriguing stuff going on.
And just about after every practice, we have had an insider practice report from inside the practice. And so I would assume once that scrimmage report hits from our insiders on Saturday, we'll have a really good idea of what is going on inside this building and then also on the practice field. And if you want to get that information, you'll need to become a member at BuckeyeScoop.com. That'll be on Ask the Insiders board. I don't mean to promise it, but it feels like it's going to be there.
You're not the one who has to deliver it.
Yeah,
so if someone else does it, you're not the one letting anyone down.
I can promise stuff all day long. So
I just was going to say, we are literally here at practice. We are literally inside practice. We've watched it today. We watched it a couple times last week. And I still go home and read those reports and I go, really? That's fascinating. And the information keeps panning out. So it's not like they're, there is a reason to become a member. That is definitely one of the reasons to become a member. We're gonna have some intriguing stuff coming up on Wednesday. We'll talk about that a little bit more on Wednesday. We're not quite there yet, but there will be another reason on Wednesday why you're going to want to be a member of Buckeye Scoop as well.
Absolutely. So that will do it for today. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. YouTube.com/Buckeye Scoop. You catch it all there. So thank you guys. We'll talk to you later.